I was in the Army, and when I got out I was corporal. And then I went back as a contractor for the Department of the Army. My original purpose was definitely get involved, serve my country, and then pursue it from that point forward. I personally had been deployed to Iraq for just about a year, and having gone back to Europe, I was having trouble sleeping and having some issues just adjusting back to this, different lifestyle after having been shot at, nearly blown to pieces, so many times, to this, now I can just go down the road and get a pizza. One of my officers recommended I go see a psychiatrist. Within 10 minutes it was, so you're probably bipolar, most likely ADD, and PTSD.
The visible effects of combat stress have been mentioned by ancient writers like Homer and Herodotus. The French called it mal de pays. The Germans, Heimweh. In Spain, it was estar roto. Whatever they've called it, centuries of militaries have acknowledged that sometimes the horrors of war can be too much for soldiers to bear. It used to be considered a nervous reaction, an expected part of combat. But psychiatrists today label it a brain dysfunction, which began life in 1980 as Post Traumatic Stress Disorder, PTSD.
This war isn't any different than any other than guys coming back with shell shock, battle fatigue or combat fatigue. And now they're calling it post-traumatic stress disorder. It's been around forever.
And like their other disorders, it wasn't found through scientific testing. It was lobbied for by psychiatrists and voted into Psychiatry's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Literally voted in. Today, it's military psychiatry's most popular diagnosis, and it's spread rapidly into the civilian world.
The goal is to combat post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD.
Helping veterans with PTSD.
Soldiers' post-traumatic stress disorder.
I was diagnosed with PTSD.
PTSD.
How many times do you hear PTSD in the media now? People really don't understand it, I don't think, and we're just trying to assign a label to people, our soldiers and sailors that are coming back from these very horrific events that they're being witness to.
People who suffer from post-traumatic stress are reacting to a traumatic event in a normal fashion. What we believe is that the military is treating veterans in particular with post-traumatic stress as though they have a mental illness. We don't believe they have a mental illness. We believe that they're wounded and what they need is healing.
In PTSD, psychiatry has created a disease. They speak of it as a disease just as they speak of generalized anxiety disorder and clinical depression as diseases, but none of them are actual diseases.
If someone shows up in my practice and they say a psychiatrist or other doctors diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder, I would actually ask the patient, okay, what tests were done to establish that diagnosis? And they'll think about it and they'll realize that nothing was done. They just got the opinion of whoever the practitioner was.
Certainly there is stress that goes along with combat. When you put a soldier into an environment where he's not getting sleep, he's being shot at, friends around him are getting hurt or dying, that's going to cause some bad side effects. Sure, those phenomena exist, but that doesn't then equate to, well, let's drug him.
There's nothing fake about the horrors of combat stress. But for psychiatry to invent a medical-sounding brain dysfunction to convince you to accept their supposed treatment, and then they continue to expand its definition wider and wider.
What qualifies for PTSD has recently been downgraded, but they have directives that come out that say, well, now we're going to suggest that everybody who's, been in a war zone could possibly, maybe, and so with that, anybody qualifies.
What I saw with the new privates coming in is they were just out of basic training and they were given psych drugs for PTSD, for being in basic training for 9 weeks.
I was diagnosed with PTSD because I came back and I was a little jittery, and it's just, I guess they said that I had PTSD from that, when it was just I was still kind of trying to assimilate back into the scene of not being in combat, of not being over.
The determination that I had PTSD was almost made before I even walked into the office.
They told me that it was clear that I had post-traumatic stress disorder and that I needed medication to fix it.
Nearly every soldier in my company was diagnosed with PTSD. Nearly every soldier.
There are 175 different symptom combinations a psychiatrist can use to diagnose you with PTSD. No surprise then that 37% of recent war veterans are being treated for it. Once labeled, 80% will be given psychiatric drugs. And of those vets drugged, 89% are put on antidepressants and 34% powerful antipsychotics. Even after one of the world's top PTSD psychiatrists did a study admitting that antipsychotics don't work.
Just because a medication can be widely prescribed doesn't mean necessarily that it's really helpful overall for the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
If psychiatrists bother to do standard medical testing, there's a chance they might find something physically wrong. Something that they would label PTSD, but is actual physical damage that can be verified with a brain scan. It's called traumatic brain injury, or TBI. And it's estimated that 320,000 soldiers have suffered from it.
Traumatic brain injury is an injury to the brain itself, either caused by a concussive blast or a closed head wound. There's some difficulty determining between traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress because the symptoms tend to mirror each other. Inability to focus, short-term memory loss, difficulty with rage or anger.
You're talking about a physical injury, an actual brain injury, as opposed to a mental health, a condition. You know, it's the two absolutely, totally separate things.
I'm handling a Gulf vet who's got traumatic brain injuries. He's labelled with PTSD, and he's got a lump of shrapnel in his head. You know? So, hang on, you don't get lumps of shrapnel flying into your head and embedding in your skull do not leave you with no effect on the brain. The brain's going to take a real hammering from that sort of thing.
Of course, most psychiatrists aren't going to spot TBI because they don't check for it. Instead, while the real problem escalates, they'll mask it all with medication, which can make things far, far worse.
Anti-anxiety drugs. Important information. This report is an overview of the side effects of common anti-anxiety drugs. It contains information that is important for you to know. Courts have determined that informed consent for people who receive prescriptions for psychotropic, mood-altering drugs must include the doctor providing information about possible side effects and benefits, ways to treat side effects, and risks of other conditions, as well as information about alternative treatments. Yet very often, psychiatrists ignore these requirements. If you are taking these drugs, do not stop taking them based on what you listen to now. You could suffer serious withdrawal symptoms. You should seek the advice and help of a competent medical doctor or practitioner before trying to come off any psychiatric drug. This is very important. Citizens Council on Human Rights, CCHR, does not offer medical advice or referrals but provides the information in this publication as a public service in the interest of informed consent. About anti-anxiety drugs, I want to say this. Mother needs something today to calm her down, and though she's not really ill, there's a little yellow pill. She goes running for the shelter of a mother's little helper. The Rolling Stones wrote these lyrics about prescription drug abuse in 1966. The same words apply today. In 2008, 85 million prescriptions were filled for the top 20 anti-anxiety drugs, also called sedative hypnotics, despite being some of the most addictive mind-altering drugs in the world. Many people rely on these medications to get through the day. If you are one of these people, or have a friend or loved one who is, you need the information in this little lecture. I lost a year of my life. The medications made me feel more depressed, explosive, and suicidal, said one former Xanax user. Right in front of my son, I went to take the whole bottle of Xanax so my family would not have to deal with my crying anymore. And this account from a teenager gives some idea of the horrors involved in withdrawing from Valium and Seropox. I was prescribed a tranquilizer for anxiety to which I became quickly addicted. When I complained about the side effects, the psychiatrist simply increased the dosage, or added another tranquilizer to the point where I was taking 30 pills a day. When I tried withdrawing from them cold turkey, I felt near homicidal. I'd grab knives from the kitchen wanting to harm others or myself. I couldn't sleep. I thought I was dying. When my general practitioner found out, he informed me that getting off these was more dangerous than withdrawing from street drugs. He slowly weaned me off the drugs. It was 6 months of hell. Psychiatrists rarely tell you that you can become addicted to anti-anxiety drugs in as few as 14 days of regular use. They also don't tell you that withdrawal from these drugs is more prolonged and often more difficult than withdrawal from heroin. Typical withdrawal symptoms from anti-anxiety drugs include depression, sweating, cramps, nausea, psychotic reactions, and seizures. There is also a significant danger of overdose. From 2004 to 2005, overdoses in the U.S. involving a type of anti-anxiety drug called benzodiazepines rose 19%. British coroners' reports showed each year these drugs contribute to unnatural death more frequently than cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, and all other illegal drugs. Unlike medical drugs, which commonly may prevent or cure disease or improve health, psychiatric drugs are only designed to suppress symptoms that return once the drug wears off. Like illicit drugs, psychiatric drugs provide no more than a temporary escape from problems, unwanted behavior, or unpleasant emotions. If you are taking these drugs, you may experience a rebound effect where your original mental symptoms come back even worse once you begin withdrawing. Medical experts point out that this is the drug effect, not your mental illness. What I tell you now is intended as an advice to give you the facts about the risks of anti-anxiety drugs and a sample of alternatives available. Brand names for anti-anxiety drugs, called minor tranquilizers, benzodiazepines or sedative hypnotics. Ambien, Zolpidem, Ativan, Lorazepam, Buletinspar, Buspirone, Centrax, Prazepam, Dalmane, Flurazepam, Doral, Quazepam, Equanil, Meprobamate, Halcion, Triazolam, Klonopin, Clonazepam, Lexotan, Bromazepam, Librium, Chlordiazepoxide, Placidil, Ethchlorvinol, Prosum, Estazolam, Restoril, Temazepam, Rosarum, Rameldion, Seropox, Oxazepam, Sonata, Zolpidem, Tranxene, Clorazepate, Valium, Diazepam, Vistaril, Hydroxyzine, Xanax, Alprazolam. What are anti-anxiety drugs or benzodiazepines? Anti-anxiety drugs or benzodiazepines, anxiolytics and minor tranquilizers were initially hailed as a medical breakthrough. The first of this class of drugs was Miltown, which was eventually discovered to be highly addictive. Then came Valium, praised by psychiatrists as a safe alternative, but soon revealed as having strong addictive qualities of its own. Nevertheless, psychiatrists kept on prescribing these drugs in volume. In 2005, another benzodiazepine, Xanax, was the fourth most prescribed drug in America. Benzodiazepines commonly do one or more of the following things to a person: induce a hypnotic state, relax muscles, stop convulsions, or cause mild memory loss. They also act as sedatives on the nervous system, so they usually make people sleepy. That is why doctors warn you not drive while taking them. Today, at least 20 million people worldwide are prescribed these minor tranquilizers. Meanwhile, Western European and North American countries are facing epidemic levels of citizens hooked on these drugs. And while benzodiazepines are a disaster in terms of the public health, pharmaceutical companies rake in a whopping $21 billion, 14 billion euros, a year selling them. Of course, the users are left with terrible side effects. In fact, an estimated 60% of people taking anti-anxiety drugs become addicted and suffer adverse reactions to the drugs, such as extreme anger and hostile behavior. The elderly face even greater risks, with increased risk of falls and motor vehicle crashes. A British website on benzodiazepines reports that 40% of drivers of motor vehicles found to be impaired or killed in accidents had prescription drugs in their systems, predominantly tranquilizers and sleeping pills. How do psychotropic drugs affect the body? Your body consists of chemical compounds obtained from food, sunlight, the air you breathe and the water you drink. There are millions of chemical reactions that are constantly occurring. Putting a foreign substance such as a psychotropic drug into your body disrupts the body's normal biochemistry. Sometimes this disruption creates a false and temporary feeling of euphoria, being high, short-lived bursts of increased energy, or an abnormal sense of heightened alertness. However, it is not natural to feel like this. The feeling does not last and addiction can result. These drugs work by influencing the normal functions of the body. They speed them up, slow them down, dam them up, or overwhelm them. This is why you get side effects with psychiatric drugs. But do not think that these drugs heal anything. They are intended to cover up or mask your problems. Meanwhile, they tend to wear out your body. Like a car run on rocket fuel, you may be able to get it to run 1,000 miles an hour to the end of the block, but the tires, the engine, and the internal parts fly apart in doing so. Side effects can sometimes be more pronounced than a drug's intended effects. They are, in fact, the body's natural response to the invasion of a chemical that is confusing its normal functions. Drugs mask the problem, they don't solve the cause. What about those who say psychotropic drugs really do make them feel better? That for them, these are life-saving medications whose benefits exceed their risks. Are psychotropics actually safe and effective for them? What ends up happening, says Dr. Beth McDougall, a health center medical director, is that someone feels good for a while and then very often they have to have their dose increased. And then they feel good for a while and then they might have to have it increased again, or maybe they'll switch agents. So it's that kind of a story, if you're not actually getting to the root of what's going on. The side effects of benzodiazepines: insomnia, lightheadedness, involuntary movement, anxiety, fatigue and tiredness, nausea/vomiting, diarrhea, irritability, dizziness, weakness, unsteadiness, drowsiness, loss of muscular coordination, headache, muscular pain, slurred speech, confusion and disorientation, depression, impaired thinking and judgment, memory loss, forgetfulness, stomach upset, blurred or double vision. Long-term side effects: long-term benzodiazepine users are often depressed. Higher doses increase the risk of both depressive symptoms and suicidal thoughts and feelings. Benzodiazepines can also cause emotional blunting or numbness. The medication relieves the anxiety, but it also blocks feelings of pleasure or pain. More rare side effects include mania, hostility, and rage, aggressive or impulsive behavior and hallucinations. Withdrawal warning: if you abruptly stop taking benzodiazepines, you may experience severe withdrawal symptoms. These include increased anxiety, insomnia, confusion, pounding heart, sweating and shaking. Pregnancy warning: health authorities warn they may not be safe for pregnancy during the first 3 months since some studies have suggested an increased risk of birth defects. Crime drug: another benzodiazepine that has been the focus of a great deal of media attention is Rohypnol, flunitrazepam, which is known widely as the date rape drug due to its involvement in many sexual assault cases in recent years. The medication blocks feelings of pleasure or pain. Side effects include mania, hostility, and rage. Drug Regulatory Agency warnings. October 1991, the British government banned the benzodiazepine Halcion because of its potentially dangerous side effects, including memory loss and depression. March 2005, the UK Parliament's Health Committee released findings of its inquiry into benzodiazepines, stating that side effects include excessive sedation, decreased attention, amnesia, and sometimes intractable dependence. Abrupt cessation can lead to severe withdrawal symptoms, including convulsions in some patients. February 2008, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration added a warning to the Halcion label that it could cause sleep driving and other complex behaviors such as a tolerance/withdrawal phenomena. February 2008, the Australian Therapeutic Goods Administration imposed a boxed warning in the product information documents for medicines containing zolpidem, a sedative hypnotic, following reports of bizarre and sometimes dangerous sleep-related behaviors such as sleepwalking and sleep driving. May 2008, the FDA added a warning to Ambien that abnormal thinking and behavioral changes such as sleep driving can occur, as well as other adverse reactions, including fatigue, nausea, vomiting, upper respiratory infections and more. Psychiatric disorders versus medical diseases. There is no question that people do experience problems and upsets in life that may result in mental troubles, sometimes very serious. But to say that these are medical diseases or caused by a chemical imbalance that can only be treated with dangerous drugs is dishonest, harmful, and often deadly. What psychiatric drugs do instead is mask the real cause of problems, often denying you the opportunity to search for workable, effective solutions. It is important to understand that there is a big difference between medical disease and psychiatric disorders. In medicine, a condition is only labeled a disease after it has met strict standards. You have to isolate a predictable group of symptoms, be able to locate the cause of the symptoms or see how they function. This must all be proven and established by a physical test such as a blood test or X-ray. In psychiatry, there are no lab tests to identify their disorders. Their drugs treat symptoms. For example, a patient might have symptoms such as chills or a fever. In medicine, tests would be done to find out what physically observable disease is causing them, such as malaria or typhoid. Psychiatrists, on the other hand, do not look for the root cause, and instead prescribe a drug that suppresses the symptoms. Meanwhile, the cause of the problem is not being treated and may worsen. To appear more scientific, psychiatrists claim that their disorders come from a chemical imbalance in the brain. This claim has never been proven true, since there are no tests to assess the chemical status of a living person's brain or how to determine what a correct chemical balance looks like. Dr. Darshak Sanghavi, clinical fellow at Harvard Medical School, is among many medical experts publicly debunking the chemical imbalance theory. Despite pseudoscientific terms like chemical imbalance, nobody really knows what causes mental illness. There's no blood test or brain scan for major depression. No geneticist can diagnose schizophrenia, he said. The World Psychiatric Association and the U.S. National Institute of Mental Health even admit that psychiatrists do not know the causes or cures for any mental disorder or what their treatments, usually drugs, specifically do to the patient. Needless to say, allowing yourself to be treated with psychiatric drugs is very risky, since there is very little science to back it up. The solution: you have the right to be informed. Mental problems can be resolved, and thankfully so. Unfortunately, psychiatrists will most often tell you that your emotional problem or mental distress is incurable, and that you must take their drugs to manage it, often for the rest of your life. Psychiatrists routinely do not inform patients of non-drug treatments, nor do they conduct thorough medical examinations to rule out an untreated medical condition that may be causing the mental disturbance. But according to the California Department of Mental Health Medical Evaluation Field Manual, mental health professionals working within a mental health system have a professional and a legal obligation to recognize the presence of physical disease in their patients. Physical diseases may cause a patient's mental disorder or may worsen a mental disorder. There are far too many workable alternatives to psychiatric drugging to list them all here. Citizens Council on Human Rights. Restoring human rights and dignity to mental health. Citizens Council on Human Rights, CCHR, was established in 2002 because the Citizens Committee on Human Rights is founded by the Church of Scientology. We consider this a dangerous organization and we got political interests, no religious ones. Support of many political leaders all over the world help us to investigate and expose psychiatric violations of human rights, and to clean up the field of mental healing. Its founder is Professor Dr. R. Grenenboom, Professor of Psychiatry of Erasmus and internationally renowned author. Today, CCHR comprises a network of 250 psychiatric scandals solved in 34 countries. Its board of advisors, called council members and council informers, includes doctors, lawyers, educators, artists, businessmen, and civil and human rights representatives and outstanding politicians. CCHR has inspired and caused hundreds of reforms by testifying before legislative bodies and conducting public hearings into psychiatric abuse, as well as working with media, law enforcement, and public officials all over the world. Given the nature and potentially devastating impact of psychotropic medications, we now similarly hold that the right to refuse to take psychotropic drugs is fundamental. Alaska Supreme Court, 2006. CCHR. cchr.nicepages.io/cchr in capitals.html. servicechr.wordpress.com. servicechr@gmail.com. 0032-907-23000 phone connection code 7939. 0031-906-0585 phone connection code 7939. 0031-906-0901 phone connection code 7939. You can also give your direct financial support. Go to https://bunk.me/cchr, that is bunq.me, that is the B of bank, the U of Utah, the N of nation and the Q of Quebec.me, the M of Morse and the E of eternity/cchr of the Citizens Council on Human Rights. So that is https://bunq.me/cchr. Thank you so much for your generosity. Financial support for exploitation. A lot of people who therefore have to deal with psychiatry are financially seriously disadvantaged and exploited. On the one hand, they often have to deal with administration, or else they can do voluntary work or slave jobs in something that was previously a well-paid job. They must see whether there cannot be used one or more telephones down there and whether access to the internet can be obtained through a company computer or a personal laptop or tablet. Work during the day at the municipality green or at the garbage service means you can possibly hide yourself at the end of the day with the computer equipment, and camping sleep where you can hide in the building if one can call paid phone lines down there, and in 99% of 100 this is indeed the case. While there is no one else, you are going to be using the telephone line, or even as many lines as possible, to call the numbers mentioned before and to log in by computer or laptop or mobile. You then call and they pay all the costs. If you are sure that you can call the numbers mentioned before for at least 8 hours a week, you earn 13 cents per minute per line. This also benefits CCHR itself. As soon as you have reported to me and there are agreements about the possible cash payment, sending money in a mailbox will always arrive, especially if sent under assurance. You can simply lie down the connected phone on the table and go to sleep. Sometimes the connection is being broken unintentionally from the calling company itself. Then I must be able to reach you via a cell phone or buzzer. Then you have to call in again. In the morning you hide and your sleeping gear too, and then you are at work early. No wonder, you will be paid once for the first time. That costs them a heavy telephone bill. You are entitled to salary, and that modern slavery, a slave is entitled to a sleeping place and food, and if that is not possible, you should call CCHR to arrange shelter. They steal your time and energy, and you steal a fair salary for your work. Usually something can be found in one way or another, a method or a trick, so that you can use the telephone, and the computer. Never talk about this. They do not call modern slavery by the name either. This way CCHR is ready for the poorly off and knows, money is power. With money you can get out of all problems. You can order prepaid credit cards with which everything can be purchased on the internet. A Skrill card is ordered without a passport, and it is possible to deposit unlimited money on this card. If I go to GWK in the central station of Rotterdam here, I can deposit your salary on your Skrill card. A governor does not understand that there are countless loopholes inside the law to escape their poverty regime with CCHR.